Welcome to Chassidus this morning. Good to be with everybody as we wait for people to come on. Okay, welcome. Koi is with us. Lima, Peru. Who else has signed in? All right. So we're going to continue with another thought about Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer that we celebrated 2 days ago on the 33rd day of the Omer. Today's the 35th. Is very unique, special holiday, which we need to understand and explore. Where is the roots of the holiday? So we know Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos. Those are all holidays that are told to us in the 5 books of Moses. Very clearly indicated that these are days to celebrate. Hanukkah, Purim, of course, they're not. They are not holidays in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses at least, because they're not biblical law, they're rabbinic law. But the story of the Megillah is in Megillah Esther, part of Tanakh. There we're told to celebrate. Hanukkah is in the Talmud. But where do we know that we should celebrate the Lag BaOmer? You won't find it, of course, not in the 5 books of Moses. You won't find it in Tanakh. You won't even find it in the Talmud. The Talmud does tell us about Rabbi Akiva and his 24,000 students, that they all died. And Lag BaOmer, the deaths stopped. But it doesn't tell us to celebrate the day. We don't find anywhere this notion. I mean, in the Talmud, that is. The first time that we have a notion of it is in the Meiri. The Meiri is a commentator on the Talmud, lived in Spain in the 13th century, passed away in 1315, early on in the 14th century. And he writes that in the tradition amongst the Gaonim, so the Gaonim were earlier, he was what we call a Rishon, but a tradition amongst the Gaonim who were post-Talmud. So again, making reference to the fact that it's not in the Talmud, the celebration, in fact, what happened on Lag BaOmer, that we know from the Talmud. But that it's meant to be celebrated, the Talmud doesn't speak about it. So a tradition from the Gaonim, the 33rd day of the Omer, the deaths cease, and it's customary not to fast. And later on, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law. It's customary not to marry or to take care of it until Lag BaOmer. As it is said, that is when they stopped dying, these students of Rabbi Akiva. And the Ramah adds that we enjoy a bit on this day. So those are the earliest references. So of course, the Meiri is making references, so does the Code of Jewish Law, that we're celebrating because the students stopped dying. So we need to understand, why is that a reason to celebrate? It's a reason to thank God, for sure. The truth is, we thank God for everything. We don't celebrate everything. Where do we see this notion that there was the, stop of the ceasing of death, and that becomes a reason to celebrate? Several commentators ask this question: where does this come from? What's the notion behind it? How do we understand it? It doesn't seem to make sense that that should be a reason to celebrate. So the Vilna Gaon, 18th century Talmudic scholar, he explains as follows. Well, we do have a precedent. Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is the 15th day of month of Av. We know that the Jewish people, after sitting with the spies, they were told that they are not going to go up to Israel. Those who were between the ages of 20 and 60, the 600,000, they were not going to go and enter the land of Israel. It'll be a new generation that will enter, and that they would die off on the 9th of Av. As God said, you made this into a day of crying, the 9th of Av. Well, it'll be eternal day of crying. Of course, two holy temples were destroyed much later on that day. But that day became the day that those who the decree was made against and not entering the land of Israel, that they would die off on the 9th of Av, they would they would bury themselves that night in a grave and see if they woke up in the morning. Guess what? Over the 40 years, there were 15,000 that passed away on the 9th of Av. The last year, what happened? The last year, well, so rather, how did they know the decree was over? As that in the last year, whoever dug a grave woke up in the morning. So they thought maybe they made a mistake. Then on the 15th of Av, which is a full moon, they realized the decree is over. So it became a time to celebrate. No more death. This is what the Vilna Gaon suggests. However, several question the Vilna Gaon's answer, because Tu B'Av is celebrated for 6 reasons. One of them is because the cessation of death of the people of Israel before going into the land of Israel as a punishment for the sin of the spies, that the Jewish people followed the spies. So we don't see anywhere that for one reason only, cessation of death should be cause for celebration. So we have our question. So the Chidah, who's also an 18th century sage, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulay, he explains the following. It wasn't so much because of the cessation of death that we are is cause for celebration. But the cause of celebration is celebrating life, and particularly education. Education of the next generation. Education of the youth. Let me explain. Think for a moment. You're Rabbi Akiva. You have devoted yourself to students who you treat them like your own children. Teach your children is speaking about your students, the Talmud tells us. He sees them as his children, and they're all not so clear whether all of them died or the vast majority of them died. In any case, whatever, too many. And yesterday we spoke about the reason for the death, the inner dimension of what happens on the physical plane. It's a spiritual reality. But that's not the discussion or the point now. The point now is, you're Rebbe Akiva, and this has happened. How devastated would you be? You can't imagine. Can't imagine. How distraught. Now, of course, he's a sage, so it's not going to be why me. That will not be the question. And it's not necessarily a question. It's about the pain that you would feel for the loss of so many beloved students, children. For Rebbe Akiva, of course, it's pain, but that pain doesn't hold them down for a moment. On the 33rd of the Omer, he now finds new students. He realizes that he must continue. He must continue. He's got an obligation. He finds new students, and he found 5 new students. 5 new students that he finds are Reb Meir Baal Hanes, Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi, Reb Shimon, Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, and Reb Elazar ben Shammai. And they will be the ones who will uphold Torah for the next generation. He sees that he must find another student, and he finds 5. How crucial was this? Crucial. The crossroads of Judaism. Will it survive? Back then, nothing was in writing except for Tanakh. The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Everything else was oral tradition. Nothing was written until about 100 years later, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Judah the Prince, who wrote the Mishnah. So it was crucial in order that Judaism should move forward. You must have students who devote themselves entirely to the study of Torah. Crucial. And he found. It's not just he found. He didn't let anything hold him back because of the devastation. He found new life in the study of Torah for new students. And with that, he'll uphold Judaism and uphold the world. What was his attitude? Well, let me give you a metaphor of a father who has to take a rambunctious young little boy, his son, to work. but he's got a very important day ahead of him, and he needs peace and quiet. His rambunctious son, I'm not going to, create peace and quiet for him. Well, he focuses on his work, but he has to take care of him. So he takes he finds from a newspaper a clipping of the world. He sees the world. So he cuts it up into small pieces, make a puzzle out of it, and gives it to his son. Here, put it together. Put it together. I'll give you a prize. I think it's going to be very difficult for his son to be able to put it together properly. It'll take him a couple of hours. At least he'll have a couple of hours to be able to work quietly. 15 minutes later, the son comes back and he's got the puzzle in place. Says, wow, he's got a genius of a son over here that he didn't realize. So he asked him, how did you do it? He said, well, it was kind of simple. I looked at the back side of and I saw that it was a picture of a person. So I put the person together, and that gave me the world. This is Rabbi Akiva. He realizes that he's got to put together one person to be a student. He finds, luckily, 5 students. And from the 5 students, he recreates the world. He recreates the Jewish world. And when you recreate the Jewish world, you recreate the entire world and universe. This is what happened a lot greater. Not only there wasn't despair of what occurred, pain, yes. Pain doesn't mean despair. Knowing that it is pending on him the future, and the future will be through Jewish education of students, having new students immediately upon losing his students and devoting himself entirely to them is what will be the key. Will be the key. And this is in our generation. The Rebbe, rather than seeing the despair, sees the opportunity to reach out to another Jew, to do a mitzvah, to be part of the Jewish people. Whether it was the 6-Day War, which 57 years ago, around this time, a few days from now, is when the 6-Day War began. And the Rebbe began a campaign, tefillin, reach out to everybody, connect everybody to Hashem, especially the soldiers. In 1974 came out with Mitzvah Neshek, the campaign of Jewish girls, mothers, to light Shabbos candles, even though it wasn't the tradition for many people to have young girls at the age of 3, married girls, light. Rebbe said, no, we have to introduce more light into this dark world, more students, or more adherence to a mitzvah, to dissipate, minimize the darkness of exile. So more light. Even though it wasn't a prevalent tradition for 3-year-olds, but there was such a tradition that Rebbe revived it, and everybody should be engaged in doing mitzvah. Rebbe extended the concept of education not to be just to learn Torah, but educate Jews in their ignorance in the mitzvah. Rabbi Akiva sought students who would devote their entire day, their entire lives to the study of Torah. Because again, Torah was oral. If you didn't have those that were completely devoted, it'd be a question of how the oral tradition would carry forward. There weren't books, can always go to the library and to the Chabad house and go and learn or have a line of class. No. It was necessary to have completely devoted students. Today, the Rebbe expands that notion. Student of Torah, someone, of course, who studies Torah, but also engages in doing a mitzvah. So this is then what began was the cause, is that this day is a day dedicated to the students. And therefore we see the tradition that's actually written out in books and Sforim before the Rebbe, as it's a day the teachers would take out their students in the field and do outdoor activities, like playing with bow and arrows back in the day. So in a sense, it wasn't even about devoting to the study of Torah, because on that day, today, we have grand parades. But the grand parade is celebrating Jewish life, but specifically Jewish children in Jewish life. Parade of Judaism. That's an education we have to give today to our children, not to be frightened, to be seen as a Jew and to act as a Jew in the public forum. Yes, today people are somewhat frightened because of the situation. No, my Bible comes to teach us education of a child today. As Rabbi Akiva began in his day, it was literally to maintain that there would be a Jewish future, because these students became the repository of all Jewish knowledge. Today, the Jewish knowledge is there. Anybody who wants it can go pick up a Talmud or go buy a Tanya. They have it all. But where the repository now becomes is to bring Jewish education in, as in Jewish law says, the first halacha, the first Jewish law is don't be embarrassed with your Judaism. So here, when you celebrate it publicly, marching, with parade, with floats depicting the mitzvahs, depicting Jewish life, this is Lag BaOmer. This is something to celebrate. So Rabbi Akiva in his day celebrated the way he did, or he brought cause to celebrate, rather. It wasn't that he celebrated, he did what he needed to do. In our generation, focusing on Jewish education, next generation, maintaining Jewish life. And therefore we gather the kids and the kid in us, every adult, to be part of living Judaism. All right, folks. We'll see you soon by Chumash Rashi. Thank you for joining me.